You spray, you prune, you pray. And yet, every spring, the aphids come back like they've got a standing invitation. Well, here's the hard truth. They might. Some of the most popular plants in American gardens are basically flashing neon signs that say, all-you-can-eat buffet to these sap-sucking pests. Today, we're exposing 15 plants that secretly roll out the welcome mat for aphids, and what you can do about it. Let's dig in. Number 1. Nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are a cottage garden classic, cheerful, edible, and ridiculously easy to grow. But they also happen to be one of the biggest aphid magnets on the planet. Black bean aphids, in particular, are absolutely obsessed with them. These tiny black insects will cluster by the hundreds on nasturtium stems and the undersides of their round, lily pad-like leaves, often turning entire sections of the plant into a squirming black mass. Now, here's the twist. Experienced gardeners actually use this to their advantage. Because aphids love nasturtium so much, they make an excellent trap crop. Plant them several feet away from your prized vegetables, and the aphids will flock to the nasturtiums first, leaving your tomatoes and beans alone. The mistake most people make is planting nasturtiums right next to their veggie beds. That doesn't distract the aphids, it just gives them a convenient stepping stone to everything else you're growing. So if you love nasturtiums, keep growing them. Just plant them as a sacrificial decoy on the edge of your garden, and once they're loaded with aphids, you can pull the infested plants and toss them, pests and all. Number 2. Roses. Ask any rose grower what their number one enemy is, and chances are you'll hear one word: aphids. Roses are practically synonymous with aphid problems. There's even a species named after them, the rose aphid, a plump green or pink insect that specializes in attacking the soft, tender new growth that roses produce all season long. You'll usually find them stacked like commuters on a subway car along flower buds and fresh shoots. And because they're feeding on the newest, most delicate tissue, the damage shows up fast. Distorted leaves, deformed buds, and flowers that never open properly. On top of that, aphids excrete a sticky substance called honeydew, which coats the leaves and invites black sooty mold to grow. The good news? Roses are tougher than they look. A strong blast of water from the hose every few days will knock most aphids off, and they're surprisingly bad at climbing back up. You can also encourage ladybugs and lacewings, which treat an aphid-covered rosebush like a five-star restaurant. Just go easy on high-nitrogen fertilizers. All that lush, rapid growth is exactly what draws aphids in the first place. Number 3. Milkweed. If you've planted milkweed to help save the monarch butterflies, first of all, good on you. But you've probably also noticed something alarming: clusters of bright yellow-orange insects coating the stems. Those are oleander aphids, and milkweed is one of their favorite meals. These vivid yellow pests with black legs feed on the plant's sap and multiply at a shocking rate. And here's a wild fact: the aphids you see on your milkweed are essentially all females, cloning themselves without ever needing a mate. That's why an infestation seems to explode overnight. Now, before you reach for the spray bottle, hold on. Any insecticide you use on milkweed, even organic options like insecticidal soap, can harm the very monarch eggs and caterpillars you planted it for. Instead, put on some garden gloves and squish the aphids by hand, or knock them off with a targeted stream of water, being careful to check for caterpillars first. In most cases, healthy milkweed can tolerate a fair number of aphids without serious harm. Think of them as ugly, uninvited house guests rather than a true emergency. Number 4. Sunflowers. Sunflowers seem indestructible. They're tall, tough, and fast-growing, but those thick, juicy stems are pumping massive amounts of sugary sap, and aphids know it. It's common to find colonies of aphids gathered along sunflower stems and under the broad leaves. And where there are aphids, there are usually ants. In fact, if you see ants marching up and down your sunflower stalks, that's often your first clue. Ants actually farm aphids, protecting them from predators in exchange for that sweet honeydew they excrete, and it's one of nature's strangest business partnerships. The silver lining is that mature sunflowers are so vigorous that aphids rarely do them serious damage. A big, established sunflower can shrug off a colony that would devastate a smaller plant. That's why some vegetable gardeners deliberately plant a row of sunflowers as a living trap crop, drawing aphids away from more vulnerable crops nearby. Young seedlings are a different story, though, and a heavy infestation can stunt them before they get going. So keep an eye on your sunflowers early in the season, hose off any clusters you find, and consider disrupting those ant highways with a barrier of diatomaceous earth at the base. Number 5. Hollyhocks. Hollyhocks are the towering queens of the old-fashioned garden, sometimes reaching 8 feet tall, with blooms in nearly every color. Unfortunately, they're also one of the most reliable aphid hotels you can plant. Aphids adore hollyhocks. The tall stems are lined with soft, fuzzy leaves and packed with sap, and colonies will happily set up shop from the base of the plant all the way to the flower buds at the top. Because hollyhocks grow so tall and dense, infestations often go unnoticed until leaves start curling, yellowing, and dropping. To make matters worse, aphid honeydew makes hollyhocks even more prone to the fungal diseases they're already famous for, like hollyhock rust. Here's how to stay ahead of it. Check the undersides of the lower leaves once a week, since that's where trouble usually starts. Blast off any aphids with the hose and remove the worst affected leaves entirely. Giving hollyhocks plenty of spacing and air circulation helps too. Crowded, stressed plants are always the first to get attacked, and whatever you do, clean up hollyhock debris at the end of the season, because it gives both pests and diseases a cozy place to overwinter. Number 6. Lupines. With their dramatic spires of pea-like flowers, lupines are showstoppers in any perennial bed. But they've got a dark secret. They attract one of the biggest aphids you'll ever see. The lupin aphid is a large grayish-green insect dusted with a waxy, powdery coating. And when these things descend on a lupin, they don't mess around. Colonies can grow so dense that the flower spikes look like they've been dipped in gray fuzz. Unlike many aphid infestations, which are mostly cosmetic, a severe lupin aphid attack can actually wilt and kill an entire plant. These aphids typically hide on the undersides of leaves and deep within the flower spikes, so by the time you notice them, the party is already in full swing. Your best defense is vigilance. Start inspecting your lupines in mid-spring, right as the flower stalks begin to form. If you catch a colony early, a strong jet of water or a spray of insecticidal soap will take care of it. If a flower spike is completely overrun, don't be a hero. Cut it off, bag it, and throw it away. The plant will often push out fresh, clean growth afterward. Number 7. Fava beans. If you grow fava beans, also known as broad beans, you've probably met the black bean aphid, and if you haven't yet, brace yourself. Black bean aphids treat fava beans like their personal kingdom. These small, matte black insects swarm the tender growing tips at the top of the plant, forming dense colonies that can completely encase the stems. Left unchecked, they'll stunt the plant, deform the pods, and spread to your other beans, spinach and beets. But here's a trick that gardeners have used for generations. Pinch out the tops. Once your fava plants are in full flower and the first pods are forming, snap off the top few inches of each plant. That soft, succulent tip is exactly what the aphids are after, so removing it takes away their favorite real estate, and as a bonus, it encourages the plant to put more energy into producing pods. You can even eat those pinched out tips, by the way. They're delicious sautéed, as long as they're aphid-free. Combine this trick with early planting, since aphid populations peak in warm weather, and you'll harvest beautiful beans while your neighbors are still fighting the black tide. Number 8. Cabbage and other brassicas. Cabbage, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. The whole cabbage family is a magnet for a very specialized pest, the cabbage aphid. These grayish-green insects are covered in a white, waxy, powdery coating that makes a colony look like someone spilled ashes on your plants. And that waxy armor isn't just for looks, it actually repels water and makes sprays less effective, which is why cabbage aphids are so frustrating to deal with. They cluster in the crinkled folds of kale leaves, deep inside Brussels sprouts, and on the undersides of cabbage leaves where they're incredibly hard to reach. A bad infestation can stunt plants, curl leaves, and honestly make your harvest look too gross to eat. Prevention is your best friend here. Use floating row covers from the moment you transplant to physically block aphids from ever reaching the plants. Check your crops weekly and crush any small colonies before they explode. If you're spraying insecticidal soap, add a drop of dish soap to help it stick to that waxy coating and aim for the undersides of the leaves. Finally, pull and destroy old brassica plants as soon as the harvest ends. Leaving them in the ground is like leaving the buffet open all winter. Number 9. Calendula. Calendula, or pot marigold, has a glowing reputation as a companion plant. But here's what most gardening blogs won't tell you. Calendula attracts aphids like crazy. Those soft stems and abundant blooms are irresistible to several aphid species, and colonies will happily gather along the stems just below the flower heads. If you've planted calendula right beside your vegetables, expecting it to protect them, you may have accidentally done the opposite, luring aphids straight into the neighborhood. But before you rip it all out, here's the full picture. Calendula's aphid appeal is exactly what makes it a fantastic trap crop when used correctly. Even better, its flowers attract hoverflies, ladybugs, and lacewings, and hoverfly larvae alone can each devour hundreds of aphids as they develop. So calendula essentially baits the aphids and calls in their executioners. The key is placement and expectations. Plant calendula a little distance from your most vulnerable crops, not right up against them. Let it collect aphids, watch the beneficial insects move in, and resist the urge to spray, because any pesticide will wipe out the good guys along with the bad. Managed this way, calendula goes from secret aphid recruiter to the anchor of your garden's natural pest control. Number 10. Dahlias. Dahlias reward you with some of the most spectacular blooms in the flower world, and unfortunately, aphids appreciate them just as much as you do. Aphids target dahlias as tender new shoots, flower buds, and the undersides of leaves, drinking the sap that the plant needs to fuel those big, dramatic flowers. The result? Twisted, curled foliage, sticky honeydew everywhere, and buds that open into distorted, disappointing blooms, if they open at all. But here's the bigger problem. Aphids are one of the main ways viruses spread between dahlias. As they move from plant to plant feeding, they can transmit diseases like dahlia mosaic virus, which causes stunted growth and streaked, mottled leaves, and once a dahlia has a virus, there is no cure. That's why aphid control on dahlias is about more than looks. Inspect new growth regularly, especially in late spring and early summer. Hose off small colonies, use insecticidal soap for bigger ones, and always disinfect your cutting tools between plants. If one dahlia shows virus symptoms, stunted, distorted, discolored growth that isn't explained by pests alone, it's safest to remove it entirely so the aphids can't spread the disease to the rest of your collection. Number 11. Hibiscus. Few plants say tropical paradise like a hibiscus in full bloom. Sadly, few plants say free lunch to aphids quite as loudly either. Hibiscus, both the tropical kind grown in pots and the hardy garden varieties, is a favorite target of the melon aphid, a small pest that ranges from pale yellow to dark green. These aphids pile onto flower buds and fresh shoot tips, and because hibiscus is constantly producing new buds all season, the buffet never closes. The telltale signs are hard to miss: buds that drop before opening, curled and yellowing leaves, and that infamous sticky honeydew coating everything below, often followed by an ugly layer of black sooty mold. The mold itself doesn't infect the plant, but it blocks sunlight and makes your gorgeous hibiscus look like it's been dusted with soot. For potted hibiscus, you have a big advantage: mobility. Move the plant away from others, Then rinse it thoroughly with the hose, or even in the shower, hitting the undersides of leaves. Follow up with insecticidal soap or neem oil every week or so until the aphids are gone. And check any hibiscus carefully before bringing it indoors for winter. Otherwise, you'll be running an aphid daycare in your living room until spring. Number 12. Honeysuckle. Honeysuckle smells like summer itself, and hummingbirds can't resist it. Unfortunately, certain aphids can't resist it either. Honeysuckles are prone to aphid attacks on their soft new growth and along their twining stems. But bush honeysuckles, especially the Tartarian types, face an extra strange enemy, the honeysuckle witch's broom aphid. This tiny pest injects toxins as it feeds, causing the plant to sprout bizarre, deformed clusters of stunted twigs and dwarfed, folded leaves. These tangled growths are called witch's brooms, and once you see one, you'll understand the name immediately. The brooms aren't just ugly, they often die back over winter, weakening the shrub year after year, and the curled leaves conveniently shelter the next generation of aphids. If you spot witch's brooms on your honeysuckle, prune them out completely, cutting well below the deformed growth, and destroy the clippings, and do not compost them. For vining honeysuckles with ordinary aphid clusters, the usual playbook works. Hose them off, apply insecticidal soap, and encourage beneficial insects. And if you're shopping for a new bush honeysuckle, look for resistant varieties, because with this particular pest, prevention beats treatment every time. Number 13. Viburnum. Viburnums are often called the perfect shrub, gorgeous flowers, great fall color, and berries for the birds. But some of the most popular varieties come with an aphid problem built right in. The snowball viburnum aphid is the main culprit. Every spring, these dusky gray insects hatch just as the new leaves unfurl, and they immediately get to work on the tender foliage at the branch tips. Their feeding causes the young leaves to curl, twist, and roll up tightly, creating protective little pockets where the aphids continue feeding, completely shielded from sprays and predators. By the time most gardeners notice the gnarled, distorted leaves, the aphids are locked inside their leafy fortresses, and treatment becomes much harder. Here's some comfort, though. The damage is mostly cosmetic. Established viburnums tolerate it well, and the aphids typically finish their spring feeding and move on by early summer. Timing is everything with this pest. Inspect your viburnum right at bud break and treat with insecticidal soap or horticultural oil before the leaves curl. If curling has already happened, you can simply prune off the affected tips. And European snowball viburnum is especially vulnerable. So if aphids drive you crazy, consider planting a more resistant species instead. Number 14. Crepe myrtle. If you live in the American South, you know crepe myrtles are everywhere, lining streets, filling yards, and blooming their hearts out all summer. What you might not know is that they host their very own aphid. The crepe myrtle aphid is a small, pale, yellowish-green insect that feeds on crepe myrtles, and remarkably, almost nothing else. But don't let that picky appetite fool you. These aphids reproduce explosively in summer heat, and a single tree can host thousands of them. The most obvious symptom isn't the aphids themselves, it's what they leave behind. All that honeydew rains down onto lower leaves, cars, patios, and sidewalks, creating a sticky mess that quickly turns black with sooty mold. A badly affected crepe myrtle can end up looking like it survived a fire, with blackened leaves from top to bottom. The good news is that healthy crepe myrtles tolerate these aphids fairly well, and natural predators like ladybugs often bring populations down on their own. Avoid heavy nitrogen fertilizer, which fuels the tender growth aphids love, and rinse the foliage with a strong spray of water when you spot colonies. And think twice before parking under one in July. Your windshield will thank you. Number 15. Oleander. Last but not least, oleander, the tough-as-nails flowering shrub of warm climate landscapes. Oleander is famously poisonous, so toxic that most pests won't touch it. But one insect didn't get the memo. Remember the bright yellow oleander aphid from our milkweed segment? Well, oleander is its namesake host. These vivid yellow-orange pests swarm the shrub's new shoots and flower stalks in dramatic numbers, completely unbothered by the plant's toxic sap. In fact, they've turned it into a weapon. By storing the plant's toxins in their own bodies, they become foul-tasting to many predators. That bright yellow color is essentially a warning label. For the oleander itself, the damage is usually minor, some distorted new growth and sticky honeydew, because this shrub is famously resilient. But heavy colonies are unsightly, and they serve as a breeding ground that sends winged aphids off to infest any milkweed in the area. Management is simple. Blast the colonies off with water every few days, prune out heavily infested tips, and let natural enemies do the rest. Just always wear gloves when handling oleander, since every part of the plant is toxic to people and pets, a good reminder that this plant is more dangerous to you than the aphids ever will be. So does this mean you should rip out your roses and swear off sunflowers? Absolutely not. Knowing which plants attract aphids is half the battle, and now you can use trap crops, invite the ladybugs, and catch infestations early. Which of these plants surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and share it with your gardening friends. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video.